Now that we are in the month of March, there's only a few weeks left until we get into the NCAA tournament, and in today's video, I'll be ranking my top 25 teams in college basketball right now. But before we get into the rankings, if you enjoy the content, please consider dropping a like on the video and subscribing to the channel. And now, let's jump into it. And coming in at my top spot once again, it's still the Duke Blue Devils up there, and the vibes recently have matched this result to me. This week, the Blue Devils kept bullying teams and imposing their will, which was capped by an emphatic win over Virginia that showed just how good this defense has become as the season has gone on. And John Shire's group has been tested, but it keeps responding time and time again, and there's clearly more going on than just Cameron Boozer with this roster right now. And with the regular season winding down and the rivalry game against North Carolina coming up this weekend, Duke's focus is simple, as they'll just need to stay sharp, stack wins, and they'll keep that grip at the #1 spot in the entire country. And right behind the Blue Devils at the #2 spot, it's still the Michigan Wolverines. And the Wolverines continue to feel like one of the most complete teams in the country. Michigan added another eye-opening road statement by manhandling Illinois for full 40 minutes in that game. And the defense remains the identity Dusty May built this thing around. Michigan's guards set the tone, although the injury to LJ Casing could be big for them. But they also have the bigs that will overwhelm you. And the overall physicality travels each and every game. And with the Big Ten closing stretch featuring road tests and rivalry energy against Michigan State, the outlook is straightforward for this team, because if they keep defending like they have been, it'll be a nightmare for whoever they draw in March. And next at the #3 spot is Arizona, and the Wildcats just keep proving that they can win in multiple different ways, and that's exactly what makes this team so scary to me. Even while adjusting lineups with Koapi out recently, Tommy Lloyd's crew can pivot from pace and space to smash mouth basketball and still look like they're built for banner hunting this season. The Wildcats followed up a strong road win at Baylor with a dominant showing against Kansas, and they've piled up wins even on nights when the threes aren't falling. And with a major test against Iowa State coming up and the finale at Colorado, Arizona's stealing is still sky high because it doesn't rely on just one style of play. But moving up to the #4 spot in my rankings is the Florida Gators, and they are playing like one of the elite teams right now, and honestly got into the tier with the top 3 to me. And it's hard not to see why the national contender talk is getting louder for this team. The Gators have been having their way with SEC's top tier, kept the streak rolling with another road win, and then absolutely exploded, scoring 111 points against a ranked Arkansas team that looks like maybe the second best team in the conference. And the front court sets the foundation for this team, but now the guards are heating up at the perfect time. And Florida's outlook is brutal for everyone else right now, because if this group keeps dominating the glass and paint while the shot making stays alive like it has been, they're built to make a deep run in the tournament. And right behind the Gators at #5, I have the UConn Huskies. And although the UConn does have the head-to-head over Florida, the way the Gators are playing right now, I had to keep UConn behind them. But this week for the Huskies was a loud reminder that the ceiling is still championship level when everything clicks. The Huskies didn't just beat St. John's, they absolutely obliterated them and reclaimed control in the Big East race, and looked nasty when the defense executed and the turnovers were limited. They followed that with another win to keep momentum rolling for the week, and the roster has shooting to stress any matchup. And with the regular season finale and a potential Big East tournament rubber match feel on the horizon, UConn's move forward is simple, is if they can keep clean possessions, lock in on the defensive end, they can hang with anybody in the country. Coming in at the #6 spot is Iowa State, and the Cyclones week was the definition of talented but uneasy. The Cyclones handled business at Utah, but then suffered a home loss against a shorthanded Texas Tech team without JT Toppin, which has raised some real questions about their consistency, which is something that they were big on earlier in the year. But the staples are the staples for this team, as you have Milan Momcilovic, Joshua Jefferson, and Taven Lipsey, but the role players remain a roller coaster, because sometimes they're hot and sometimes they're cold, and you never really know what you're getting right now. But the timing of this gets tricky because they do have the road test at Arizona, which has been described as one of the toughest games of the entire regular season for the Cyclones. But I still believe Iowa State can win big in March, but they need steadier support around the court to do so. At number 7 is Houston, and the Cougars dropped another tough one to start the week. on the road at Kansas, which stretched their rough patch to 3 losses in a row, but then they responded with an emphatic bounce-back win by absolutely stomping Colorado. The guard play for this team is high-end, and it's still a Kelvin Sampson defense, but the depth isn't anything special, and the offense can lean heavily on jumpers at times, and that's the tension I have with this team right now, as it can look like a Final Four caliber team, but then just hit a snag. And with the postseason almost here and only a few games left before it, Houston really needs to try and stabilize before getting into the tournament so they can actually do something and make it back to the Final Four. Nebraska comes in on my number 8 spot, and the Cornhuskers had a solid week this week and look like another step in their breakthrough season that's starting to feel normal, at least for this year's Cornhuskers team. They took care of business against Maryland and USC, and the defense continues to be the calling card in Big Ten play for the Cornhuskers. And even with the earlier season context of struggle after that hot start, Nebraska is still stacking wins and holding its place among the league's real contenders. And with another road stretch ahead and a revenge angle against Iowa in the mix, they can continue to move because that defense travels, and Nebraska can keep making this a year to remember. And right behind the Cornhuskers at number 9 is another Big Ten team in Michigan State, and the Spartans seem to be peaking at the right time, and that's always a sentence that gets people's attention when Tom Izzo is involved. The Spartans steadied themselves after a rough February stretch and followed it up with a massive road win at Purdue, plus another win that reinforced that trajectory for the team. And this team is starting to look more like the version that made noise earlier in the year, especially on the defensive end, and the paint presence has improved from Jackson Kohler and Carson Cooper as the season's gone on. And the Big Ten title might be out of reach, but the March outlook is the part that matters, because when Michigan State defends, it's built to win the kind of games that can swing brackets and make a run in the tournament. And rounding out the top 10 at number 10, I have Alabama, who jumps in after another successful week. And this Crimson Tide team is one of the most annoying teams on the planet to prep for, because their style forces you to guard everything and everywhere. The Crimson Tide kept the heater going with another emphatic win, then pulled off a shocking comeback on the road at Tennessee, which was capped by a late game winner. And when this offense is humming, it can absolutely scoot, especially with shot makers who can make it rain, like LeBaron Philon, Aiden Holloway, and Latrell Wrightsell. But the flaw here is loud, though, as Alabama can't rebound to save its life, and that'll be a problem come March. But right now, with the Alabama team, it's classic Nate Oates style of the high ceiling, high stress, and how far they can go in March will all be determined by where they end up in the bracket. Coming in at number 11, I have Illinois, and the Illini to me feel like they're at a crossroads. The talent on this team is obvious, and the offense has been described as historically efficient and one of the best in the country. The roster also has size and the shooting to punish mismatches, but the results lately haven't matched that profile. This week, Illinois dropped a home game to Michigan and got pushed around in the front court all game long, which brings on the question of if the Illini's skilled front line can actually outmuscle the other big front courts they're bound to face in the tournament. But with 2 games left to reset before postseason play, I still feel like Illinois can be dangerous, but it needs to rediscover its identity fast. At number 12 is the Kansas Jayhawks, and Kansas's season has been a roller coaster to say the least, and that's not only with Darren Peterson's injury, but also with their big wins and bad losses. The Jayhawks started this past week with a huge win over Houston, but then got scorched by Arizona on the weekend, which perfectly captures the ebbs and flows of this backloaded stretch that the Jayhawks have had. They've got size on the interior, but the concern for me is the physicality in the paint, where multiple opponents have bodied them lately. But the good news for this team is upside, because they do have a player like Darren Peterson on their roster, and with Kansas is on its game, it can handle anything thrown at them, and that's been shown already this season, and you can feel the danger this team could bring in March. Virginia comes in at number 13, and they ran into a reality check this week when they went up against Duke and was clearly no match for the Blue Devils, which was made clear in that tough road environment at Cameron Indoor for the Cavaliers. But even so, this group still has size, skill, and shooting in depth, and when it's flowing, it can look like the second best team in the ACC for sure. But the issue for this team is their floor, because on cold shooting nights, it can get ugly in a hurry for the Cavaliers, and Virginia had been riding a long win streak before that loss, so I'm not panicking too much, but the result definitely did change my opinion on what this team's ceiling can be in the tournament. But still, Ryan Odom's first season with the Cavaliers has been a success, and I truly do believe they still can make the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. Next at number 14 is Purdue, and Purdue didn't do itself any favors this week, and the trend line recently has been going in the wrong direction to say the least. The Boilermakers took another home loss, this time to Michigan State, and then the weekend added another blemish with their loss on the road at Ohio State, which then pushes them even further down the Big Ten ladder. But when the offense is cooking for this team, Purdue can feel inevitable, but there's clear concern as it doesn't make opponents uncomfortable defensively, and this team still has experience and firepower on the roster, but it definitely needs more edge on defense down the stretch to avoid becoming the next preseason number 1 team that busts in the postseason. Texas Tech moved up to number 15 in my rankings, even without JT Toppin, because this team just went into Hilton Coliseum and beat Iowa State, and it wasn't luck at all, as this team, led by Christian Anderson, has become a band of warriors even without their leader in Toppin. This week also included another solid win to keep the momentum going for the Red Raiders, and the theme is clear as this group is outworking teams and proving its season didn't end with that injury, and Grant McCaslin has them playing with edge, and that matters when the calendar flips to March. And for Texas Tech, I believe that they keep defending and competing like they have been, they truly can make a run in March still, even without JT Toppin. Gonzaga dropped again in my rankings, this time to number 16. In their first matchup of the week, they absolutely crushed Portland in their revenge spot, because we do know Gonzaga took that upset loss on the road at Portland a few weeks ago. But then they went up against their rivals St. Mary's in the WCC, and in the second half, their offense went absolutely MIA and took the loss on the road. And now the Zags are definitely a defense-first identity, then they can still win games, but March is rarely forgiving if your offense disappears for long stretches like it has been for the Zags recently. But with the WCC tournament ahead, the outlook for this team is definitely about finding balance, because Gonzaga doesn't need to be perfect, but it can't afford stretches where the offense stalls like we've seen recently, and they also need Braden Huff badly from injury, and we'll have to see if he's ready to go in March or not. St. John's is up next at number 17, and they had a really strange week to me, as because they took a blowout loss but then also had a blowout win, and both were loud results for the Johnnies. The Red Storm's offense completely disappeared in that trip to UConn, especially in the second half against the Huskies, but then they flipped the switch and hammered Villanova in their next game, which makes it tough to know exactly what to expect night to night from this team. The storyline for the St. John's Johnnies going into the tournament, though, will be consistency, as shooting woes can sink this team, but the talent level still gives it a puncher's chance against anyone in the Big East and against most in the tournament. And Rick Pitino's group is still firmly in the mix, and I truly believe they can be a dangerous postseason problem for a lot of different teams. North Carolina comes in ranked at number 18 for me, and the Tar Heels just keep finding ways to win even without Caleb Wilson, and that's the headline to me. This week, the Tar Heels actually stacked some quality wins, including taking care of Louisville and Virginia Tech, and the tone around this team right now just seems to be resolved without their star player in Wilson. And it hasn't always been pretty, but North Carolina hasn't lost at home, and it consistently has shown it can close games when needed. And the next stretch, though, brings real tests, because they have a matchup with Clemson and then a rematch at Duke, which is about as tough of a regular season finish as it gets in the ACC. But if North Carolina can somehow go 1-1 and then get Caleb Wilson back and get ready for the tournament, I truly believe North Carolina is on the up and trending in the right direction. Arkansas comes in at number 19, and the Razorbacks have the players, but the depth concerns are hard to ignore for me. The Razorbacks picked up another win early in the week last week, but then they got run out of the building by Florida, and the front court mismatch was a big part of the story. The bigger worry is structural though, as Arkansas's issues in the front court and on their bench are their Achilles heel right now, and that's the kind of weakness that can get hunted in the NCAA tournament by teams. But still, their resume has quality wins and no bad losses, which keeps the baseline strong, and Arkansas can still beat good teams, but it needs answers inside to avoid a matchup nightmare in March. At the number 20 spot, I have St. Mary's, who jumps into my top 25 after that signature win over Gonzaga, which included their second half dominance of the Zags. And the Gaels avenged earlier setbacks, rode the momentum of big home wins, and pushed themselves into the national conversation this week as a team to watch when the bracket drops. The streak, the confidence, and the identity all feel real right now from the Gaels, and the tone around this group is that it's quietly become a legitimate problem, not only in the WCC, but also as one of the best mid-majors out there. And with the WCC tournament ahead and a potential third meeting with Gonzaga on the table, the outlook for this team is big, because if St. Mary's keeps defending and getting timely shot making from guys like Paulius Morauskas and Mikey Lewis, it can absolutely be a wreck your seed line kind of team in March. Coming in at the number 21 spot is Vanderbilt, and the Commodores' resume has some real shine from those early season performances, but this week also showed the tightrope that they're currently walking. Vanderbilt got back on track with a solid win over Georgia to start the week, but then struggled to slow down Kentucky on the road, and that's now losses in 3 of their last 4 games. But the metrics for this team are still described as pretty great, but the momentum is slipping, and they could be unranked here soon. But the positive side of things for Vanderbilt is that they're starting to get back to fully healthy as a team, which could be big once the NCAA tournament begins, but we'll have to see how they trend in their final couple of games to fully understand just where this team is at. Moving up to number 22 in the rankings is the Miami, Ohio RedHawks, and this is still one of the easiest teams to describe, but also the hardest team to place, as they just keep winning. The RedHawks remained unbeaten this week and survived another tight one at Western Michigan, which included a late game winner in a comeback, but the perfect season is still alive, and there's real respect baked into what this team has done, but the metrics right now still don't love them, and their strength of schedule is debatable, but at some point winning just matters, and that's where Miami, Ohio is living right now. And if they can finish perfect in the regular season, I truly believe no matter what happens in the MAC tournament, they'll be dancing in March. And another new team to my top 25 is Miami, who comes in at number 23, and the Hurricanes have been a major piece of the ACC's step forward this season, and this week reinforced how steady this team has been all season long. The wins kept coming, including a road result against Florida State and another comfortable victory against Boston College to close out a strong February for the Canes, and this team has proved that it can play with just about anyone this season, and if they can stay sharp heading into March Madness, I don't see why this team couldn't win a game or two in the tournament. Next at number 24 is BYU, and right now the only reason why this team is still ranked is the fact that a lot of other teams around them lost as well. And this past week was not a good one for the Cougars, as they took 2 losses, with a loss against UCF at home and then a loss on the road at West Virginia. And right now, the loss of Richie Saunders for the Cougars just seems to be heavily impacting what they have been doing. And outside of AJ DeBansa and Robert Wright, BYU has not gotten that production from anyone else. And the Cougars need to stabilize fast, because if they can't stop this stretch of losses, they're going to be one of the teams that might get upset in the first round of the tournament. And rounding out the top 25 at number 25, I have St. Louis, and the Billikens are still terrific, but their recent games have shown some vulnerabilities that could play a factor in their play in March. In their past 4 games, the Billikens have dropped 2, and this past week, they took another road loss, this time at Dayton, which came after a slow start, but then they responded with a bounce-back win against Duquesne. And the overall vibe here wasn't panic, or hasn't been panic for me, but to be honest, St. Louis isn't playing its best basketball right now, and you could argue the A-10 has some competition against others, so they aren't necessarily the favorites to win the tournament just yet. but we'll have to see if St. Louis can get back to the way they were playing earlier in the year and make a run in March. But as always, I wanted to quickly mention some of the teams that are just on the outside of my top 25 rankings, but could be included in my next one, and they are Tennessee, Louisville, Kentucky, Utah State, and Villanova. But that wraps it up for today's video. Let me know your thoughts on my top 25 rankings in the comments down below. Was there a team that I have that's way too high or way too low? Or was there a team that I didn't even include that you think should have been? Also, if you enjoy the content, don't forget to drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.